There is a Blue Sky post pushing back on the pleas and reminders to remain peaceful while protesting, basically trying to convince us that it's now time to get violent or at least destructive. And I get it, it's hard to be patient, but they wouldn't say patience is a virtue if it was easy or the norm. Then someone in that thread replied as follows: genuine question, what is protesting supposed to do? Here's what I told them, which, because of the platform, was pretty brief. Genuine answer: there are people who seldom vote and are disinterested in politics, or they're center-right. But huge protest movements can make them take notice. When all their neighbors who they're friendly with seem to all back a movement, they can suddenly realize they don't think how the majority of their neighbors think, believe, care passionately about. People don't change their minds without being challenged. Seeing millions of people just like me out there chanting, that is a challenge to think again, ask questions, quite effective. Plus, you've surely seen how obsessed hashtag IQ47 is with ratings and crowd sizes. These big protests at the very least humiliate them, almost worth it just for that. But I'm convinced the GOP folks, who are now criticizing him, do so 90% because of big protests. They want to keep their job after he's gone. End quote of my post. Now let me expound on that from my own experience. People tend to self-select into echo chambers, possibly even without realizing it. They choose a spouse who believes what they do. They choose a neighborhood with people like them. They find a church with a congregation that's like them. Then they have kids, and that's where I come in. I was raised in an echo chamber of people who are mostly Swedish, a little suspicious of Norwegians, maybe as a joke, a bit more suspicious of Italians, fearful of people of color. Were my parents overtly racist? No. They never used foul language, never said the N-word. Dad even once told a story about how disgusted he was upon hearing an overtly racist remark. But from whom did I hear my first black stereotype joke? My mom. What neighborhoods was I cautioned about when I was old enough to go riding my bike beyond our immediate area? The ones getting closer to St. Paul, with more apartments, cheaper housing. I absorbed all sorts of prejudices from my parents, especially Ma, without them ever saying anything like, oh, you can't trust those people. And those same prejudices were reinforced by the echo chamber of our church, my neighborhood friends, my classmates. I was oblivious. I didn't know I was in several layers of echo chamber. Heck, I'd never even heard the term. Although not registered party members, we were Republicans. We were glad when Nixon won. We were disappointed that he had to resign. We were pro-Reagan. We were disappointed that Minnesota was the only state to embarrassingly vote for Mondale. Liberals were godless. Liberals were pro-union, and we were anti-union. Liberals were pro-abortion, feminists. All the things that were offensive to the gospel were liberal things. But wait, didn't we learn about Jesus in Sunday school? Yeah. A Sunday school teacher once explained to us that the parable of the Good Samaritan was like stopping to help someone who ran out of gas even if they have a Packers bumper sticker. Okay, fast forward to having teenagers of my own, still finding churches and neighborhoods where everyone else is like me, normal, moral, righteous person living in the suburbs of an anomalously liberal metro area. Then someone at worship team practice was ranting a bit, and she said if Jesus was here today, he'd be a Democrat. I may have gasped a little. I know I heard others gasp. Then she backed up her declaration with some very good points that made me mad. I stewed about this a long while. Didn't sleep well that night. She challenged my thinking. She used scripture verses that I knew well, but clearly she read them through different lenses than I ever had. Why would a Christian be a liberal? Why would a liberal be a Christian? I decided to dig into this, but with a concerted effort to be as objective as I could, to pick holes in my own assumptions. I changed. In the next election, I voted for Obama, my first Democrat vote ever. Then I heard the disgusting ways some Republicans criticized him. I gradually came to realize that the kinds of churches I always attended were mostly full of rich white racists. or at least white racists who wanted to rub elbows with rich ones, hoping for an unfair career advantage. What does all this have to do with peaceful protests? People who came up in echo chambers like mine think that all protests are like the race riots of the 60s or the Rodney King riots in LA. Black Lives Matter caught my attention. This was different. I'm not saying it was novel, only that this was when I noticed. They were markedly more peaceful than I would have assumed. I paid more attention. See, learning that you have a neighbor that votes differently than you might be a bit of a surprise, but it's easy to shrug off as an anomaly. When you see tens of thousands of your neighbors loudly but peacefully voicing a passionate opinion that differs from your bubble, that's a challenge. People don't change their thinking if they're never challenged.